The NFL officially announced that they are going to a 17-game season, a 17-game schedule, essentially. So they're reducing the preseason to 3 games. I believe their plan is to have 18 weeks, where the 18th week is treated almost like a mini playoffs, and 17 games, which obviously it's been 16 for a very long time, as long as I can remember. Before that, it was 14, way back, I think, in the 70s. So what are your thoughts just as a coach, as a player, like the grind that 17 game season may have on them?
Well, the first thing that my mind goes to is, number one, players don't get paid for preseason games. Okay. So if you're going to ask them to play 17 games now instead of 16, what would be fair is currently basically their salaries are, if it's, let's just say, make it really easy math, like if it was $16 million, they get a game check with each game, right? So you get $1 million game check. You're going to get a lot of pushback if that 16 million is now divided over 17 games, right? So do they get an incremental basically raise per having that game? Because then players would probably be okay with it. But if now we're playing more real games, which means more starters in, because the 4th preseason game has notoriously been, you don't know anybody who's playing, right? Then, and now that 16 games or 16 million is divided over 17 games, yeah, you're going to have players pretty mad. Right. And I do think as you expand it, and you've also expanded playoffs, right? Like now you're really making the season longer. So how are you going to maintain that for the players? And that might mean, a situation where the Super Bowl has to get pushed back a week. Are we building in more bye weeks? Because apples for apples, you could say it's the same in terms of, it's the same number of games, but the impact, especially on starters, is not the same, because most of them you would never catch in a 4th preseason game anyway. And if you did, it might be like one series. So now you're asking them to play a serious game as opposed to like chill and watch the rookies do it.
I think this was huge for the NFL, speaking solely about the league, because obviously they have broadcast fees that need to happen and rights that will be divided. Yep. So them being able to add another game to this schedule is huge for them. That's a big reason they expanded the playoffs to have more games in the wild card, because they're like, look, we got more games going on now. So more money is good for the league. It's also good for the players because they're going to make more money ultimately. Now, it might hurt their health, because I do think the NFL is ultimately going to want to push to 18 games. Like I really do.
17 doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So when we look at it, for me as a fan, there's a lot of exciting matchups this season that are going to happen now that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And then you throw in the fact that, okay, fantasy football is going to be 1 week longer. My ability to talk about these games with friends is going to be a little bit longer. We get another week of football. It's all great from a fan perspective.
More from Mitch and Jen. More exactly. Joe. I mean, whatever. It's a bounty, right? In that capacity.
We have some awesome matchups. The Packers at the Chiefs. I mean, Rodgers and Mahomes. That's awesome. We have Stafford and the Rams now versus Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. We have the Cardinals and the Browns, the Seahawks and the Steelers. And my favorite one, Jen, is, of course, my Patriots taking on America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. And it's my favorite because that's my dad's team. And typically we only see our teams play every 4 years. So now we get to see them. We were actually at the game 2 years ago. Now we get to see them 2 times out of the last 3 years. So which one of those matchups excites you? Obviously, I'm on the Patriots and the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand why you like that, because it's like, it's almost which one is really America's team, right? Because,
yeah.
I know there's been talk around that. Jerry will never let that title go. But yeah, it's kind of an all-American matchup, if you will, I guess. or it's like North versus South. Like you could call that like the Civil War, right? So that's an interesting one from a straight up football perspective, particularly like in this season. Give me Rodgers Mahomes, right? Give me a high flying big ball. I don't know if it's the long term rivalry game, but in this season, what do I want to see? I want to see more Mahomes, more Rodgers, because I mean, they already have. It's like the State Farm matchup, right? Like, isn't that their insurance company? So, like, I can already picture, the catch-up commentary coming from them. Like, who's got more ketchup, right? Like, Mahomes in the background of their commercial, just putting that ketchup on the steak. Like, I still want to figure out what shade he was throwing with the ketchup. If that was throwing towards, San Francisco, who didn't have a lot of ketchup and he had all of it, or if he was throwing shade at the Steelers because they are Heinz Field. But I see some direct, goatness, right? Like young Mahomes goat, Rodgers goat. I could see this being an ongoing commentary with their commercials and a whole lot of ketchup. And then you also have, Drake from State Farm now. So there could even be a theme there. But that's the one that I think is just, a quarterback fest and a fun one to watch.
With that game, I specifically need Tony Romo to be on commentary so that every drive he just talks about the other one trying to outdo the other on different types of throws and arm angles. Like, that's all I want to hear about the entire game.
Although Drew Brees would be an interesting one on that one too, because it would be like, now we could have like 3 goats, right? Like goat. Telling you, Drew Brees on that one, he, he would have total FOMO. He'd be like, I'm going back. I got to come back.
I can do this.
Like, you'd have him all of a sudden in the broadcast booth, like, no, I can't do it. Take it down and like run down to the field and see him like, bum, 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 Drew Brees is back. Like, I can write it right now.